Tonight, I am moderating this debate. Tonight, our candidates, I'm going to introduce you. Karina Gould on the left, Frank Baylis, Chrystia Freeland, and Mark Carney will tackle 4 key themes. And those themes were informed by registered Liberals across this country. I'm just going to remind you what those were. If you didn't watch the French language debate last night, you missed a lot. But tonight, I'm glad you're with us. It's Canada's place in the world, growing a strong economy, supporting Canadians, and of course, climate change. I want to welcome all of you to the debate this evening. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Thank you.
Great to be with you, Hannah.
So I'm going to explain to viewers a little bit about the format and remind everyone here too, because we go off a little bit. So here's the format. In each theme, there is an opportunity for candidates to answer a 1-minute question. They'll each get that 1 minute and the same question. Also in the themes, there will be opportunities for 5-minute debates, and we're going to have closing statements. Some of tonight's questions did come from registered Liberals. None of the candidates or their teams know what the questions are. They're in my head. They will come out. Let's start. I want to get right into this and begin with opening statements. And this order was decided by a random draw. Mr. Baylis, your 90 seconds starts right now.
Again. Good evening, everyone. My name is Frank Baylis, and I'm a professional engineer. As a businessman, I built several companies in the healthcare sector. And along with that, I've created thousands of good-paying, high technology jobs. I know how to build strong teams. I know how to find good people and work with them to achieve results. I've also been elected as a member of parliament from 2015 to 2019. So I have an understanding of how government works. Now, this combination of my private sector and my public sector experience puts me in a unique position to be able to build systems, work with the government, and make it work for all Canadians. Now, I recognize that we're living in challenging times, but having said that, I'm very optimistic about our future. Yes, I believe in Canadians and I believe in Canada, and with my plan, I'm certain we'll reach our full potential. I'm going to focus on 3 priorities. Number 1, I want to build a strong and resilient economy that we all benefit from. Number 2, I want to improve our healthcare system so that it becomes the best healthcare system in the world. And it's not going to cost more money, it's going to save money. And 3, I want to modernize the federal government such that it becomes much more efficacious, better at delivering services to our Canadian citizens. Together, we will build a proud and prosperous Canada for all Canadians.
Mr. Baylis, thank you kindly for that. Ms. Gould, your 90 seconds starts right now.
Meeting the moment. That's why we're here tonight. Growing up in a middle-class family in Burlington, Ontario, and now having 2 kids of my own, I get what Canadians are going through. Worrying about how to pay your mortgage, keep gas in the tank, or whether you'll be able to retire. I know it hasn't been easy, as we face serious challenges to our economy and to our sovereignty. But these challenges also present us with incredible opportunities to unite our country, defend our economy, and protect our values from the threats we are facing from south of the border and our own little version of Trump here at home. I got into politics to do good things for Canadians, and with a decade of experience, I know how to get that done. I am so proud to be Canadian, especially right now, as Canadians across this country meet the moment. And tonight, each of us on this stage need to meet the moment. Tonight, I am going to raise the tough questions we need to confront as Liberals, have an honest conversation about where we stand on the big issues we face as Canadians, and present a clear plan for the future of this country. If we do not do that, we will lose the next election. Our opponents may wish that Canada is broken, but we know as Liberals, this is a great country. Now is the time for hope. I am the leader we need, and together we can build the Canada we want. And I'm asking you to join me.
Ms. Gould, thank you kindly. Ms. Freeland, you're up next.
A few weeks ago in Saskatoon, I met a 4-year-old girl named Ari. She asked me, "Can you stop Trump from invading Canada?" Ari is a smart girl, and she's asking the right question. I'm running to be leader of the Liberal Party and the next Prime Minister of Canada, because Trump is posing the gravest challenge our country has faced since the Second World War. He's threatening us with economic warfare. That's not new. Last time, he threatened to rip up NAFTA, and he imposed tariffs on our steel and aluminum. I fought back, and I won. This time, Trump's threats are even worse. He wants to make us the 51st state. Trump is unleashed and empowered. As your Prime Minister, I will be too. I have the experience, the plan, and the guts to stand up to Trump, to tell him that Canada is not for sale, and if he hits us, we'll hit him back. We need a leader who understands the seriousness of the challenge and is ready to meet it. A leader who can say to Ari and to everyone across our great country, I will fight for you. I will fight for Canada. And together, we will win.
Ms. Freeland, thank you kindly. And we move now to Mark Carney.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Carney. I was born in the Northwest Territories, and I grew up in Edmonton. During my career, I've had the honor of serving our country, including as governor of the Bank of Canada during the financial crisis of 2008. Right now, as my colleagues have said, Canada faces one of the most serious crises in our history. To get through it, we will need to build a strong economy, and that requires big changes. Canadians have been telling me that they want change. They want positive change that builds this country. I can bring that change. I know how to manage crises. I know how to build strong economies. Yes, there are a lot of uncertainties, but during a crisis, it's important to distinguish what you can't control and what we can control. We can't change Donald Trump, but we can control our economic destiny. We are masters in our own home. I have a plan that puts more money back in your pockets, a plan that makes our companies more competitive, a plan that builds a strong economy that works for you. Canadians are ready to stand up for their country. I'm ready to stand with them and bring the right change for Canada. Thank you.
Mr. Carney, thank you. Thank you all. And we're going to get right into our first theme of this evening, Canada's place in the world. So for all these 1-minute questions, you are all going to get that 1-minute chance to answer the same question. And that's where we're starting this evening. And here's a warm-up for you tonight because it comes from Deborah in British Columbia. But I think Deborah really is showing what many Canadians are asking right now. She asks, how will you stand up for Canada against U.S. President Donald Trump? But I would like to add to what she has to say, why are you the best person positioned to do this? And the order was picked ahead of time. And Mr. Baylis, you're first on this. 1 minute on the clock.
Thank you. So I've negotiated hundreds and hundreds of contracts with Americans over my 40-year career. And from time to time, I run into the character of Mr. Trump. So it's not new to me. On this point, I published a letter one day before his inauguration when I said clearly he's not going to put 25% tariffs on everything, but he is going to attack certain industries. The first one I said he's going to attack is steel. It's exactly what he did. I tell you this to tell you that I know how to deal with him. And it's important to understand that Mr. Trump is a bully. And you do not give 1 inch to a bully. In that case, we cannot be learning this on the job. That's where I come in. I have the experience and the expertise to deal with Donald Trump. I can predict what he'll do, and then I can help build our defenses to stop him from doing those things, and also counterattack, which unfortunately is going to be necessary. This way, I will protect our country, I will protect our economy, I will protect our culture, and I will protect our sovereignty.
Bang on time for the 1 minute. Appreciate that, Mr. Baylis. Mr. Carney, over to you now.
Thank you very much, Hannah. I think in a situation like this, you need experience in terms of crisis management. You need negotiating skills, but you also need economic expertise, because part of the way to deal with this situation is to do what we should have been doing and what we need to do as a country, which is to build a strong economy. Now, we're going to spend time on building a strong economy, so I'll go through my plan for that later. But let me start by being clear. We will never, ever be part of the United States in any way, shape, or form. We have to recognize that the Donald Trump of today is different than the Donald Trump of several years ago. Then his objective was to take more of our market. Now he wants to take our country. Let me finish by pointing out one other thing. Who's the worst person to stand up to Donald Trump? It's Pierre Poilievre. He worships the man. He uses his language. He's not the right person for our country at this crucial time.
Again, thank you for sticking to time on that. Ms. Gould, you're up now.
Thanks, Hannah, and thanks, Deborah, for the question. Look, men like Donald Trump have always underestimated leaders like me. But they underestimate me, and that's their mistake. And I think as Canadians, we know what that's like. We know how to stand up for who we are and to stand up to bullies. And that's something that I've been doing in the House of Commons for the last decade. I know how to stand up to people like Pierre Poilievre, who, when it comes to Donald Trump, would rather imitate him than stand up for Canada. I know how to stand up to people who want to take from us what is rightfully ours. We are a proud, sovereign country, and as Canadians, we have so much to offer, but also the Americans depend on us. And you can't bring a calculator to a knife fight. You have to fight very strongly and with the right tools, and that's exactly what I'm going to do as Prime Minister.
Ms. Gould, thank you kindly. We're going to move into our first 5-minute debate.
I think you forgot Chrystia.
Oh my gosh.
That's no
First
problem.
mistake by the moderator. My apologies. Ms. Freeland, thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. Trump represents the biggest threat our country has seen since the Second World War. I have recognized that from the outset. I've built my campaign on a plan to answer that threat. I do think, though, it is a big mistake for Canadians to think that because we can't change Trump, we can't negotiate with him. Of course we can't change him, but we can outwit him. And the way to do that is by using our leverage, by recognizing that, yes, we depend on the US, but they depend on us too. We are their largest market by far. We sell them the things we need. A smart, tough negotiator who stands up to Trump can activate those Americans who need us, get them to lobby him. That's how we get a win-win outcome. That's how Canada wins.
And now we will move into that first 5-minute debate. Thank you for pointing that out. This is an open debate. Mr. Baylis, we'll start first with you. Others can join in on this debate, but please try not to talk over each other too much. We will control that. So here's the question. Knowing the why is vital in negotiations, or you're essentially just negotiating against yourself. So why is President Trump doing this to Canada?
Well, President Trump needs to show that he has a win on the border. And he's got himself elected by saying he's going to deal with illegal immigration. And right away, he puts out a tweet saying there's a problem with Canada and Mexico. The problem is, for him, there is no problem with Canada. We know it, and the Americans know it. So he's trying to make one so that he can later solve it. Now, I want to point something out. This is not a negotiations. This is a shakedown. We have an agreement. He negotiated the agreement. He signed the agreement. The problem we have is he's not respecting the agreement.
So you believe it's the border, is what I feel for you.
I'm saying that that's his red herring, that he's trying to say we're a problem with the border that he's going to solve.
Ms. Freeland and then Mr. Carney.
Trump is starting with us for a very simple reason. If you can show the world that you can beat up on Canada, your best friend, your reliable, trustworthy neighbor, then think about how the rest of the world feels. It is the demonstration effect. It is saying, if I can beat up on those guys, imagine what I can do to you. And that's why a smart Canadian strategy needs to start with looking for allies, working in the first instance with Mexico, Panama, Denmark, and the EU, who all face the same sovereignty challenge. I think we need to invite the Secretary General of NATO to that first summit that I will host right after becoming Prime Minister. Working with our allies, we form a common front and stop Trump from doing what he wants to do, which is pick us off one after the other.
Mr. Carney, you're up next.
I want to pick up on what Chrystia just said, because I think underlying all this is what President Trump is looking for is to dominate the hemisphere. He wants to enlarge U.S. power into Canada. into Greenland, into the Panama Canal, as was just mentioned. So the stakes are very, very high. This is a serious crisis, not just an economic crisis, it's a crisis of sovereignty. So yes, we do need to build our allies. But interests of time, I'm going to add one other thing, and we'll come back to this later. We also need to build our economy. We need to build our economy right here. If we have one Canadian economy instead of 13, that more than outweighs the impact of what he's trying to do to us.
So,
Ms. Gould? Go
yeah,
ahead.
thank you. And where, as I see where my colleagues are going, and I appreciate, I think all of that is probably true, except what did we just see in Ukraine? He did a deal with Putin for critical minerals in Ukraine. Who else has critical minerals? Canada. And so we need to understand what the US is trying to do here, but we also need to make sure that we are standing up for our sovereignty and for our economy. You know, last night there was a bunch of conversations with colleagues who said, well, I'm not even going to talk to Donald Trump. Well, guess what? We don't have that choice. We have to talk to him. That is something that we absolutely have to do on behalf of Canadians. We might not like it, but that is the role of the Prime Minister, to stand up and fight for Canada every single day. And that is exactly what I am going to do. Stand up for Canadians, stand up for our industries, and to say that we have leverage, we have things the US wants, and we're not afraid to use them. And if that means that Americans are going to see increased prices or American industries are going to suffer, we will make sure that we put everything on the table as Canada, because our sovereignty, our economy, our jobs are non-negotiable.
Okay. Mr. Baylis, let's try to go 30 more seconds because we have more interactions here.
Let me tell you the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to go fly down and meet President Sheinbaum of Mexico. It's a very strong, smart lady. And I'm going to make a deal with her and say, look, we need to stand up together to Mr. Trump. He said he's putting 25% tariffs on both of us. He can't do that. It'll destroy his economy. So we need to call his bluff. And then what we need to do is take off the table what was already given for nothing, which is the work that we were going to do on our border for $1.3 billion and the work that she was going to do on her border, and say, you know what? That's off the table now. We're back to square zero. That's how I will deal with President Trump.
Okay, Mr. Carney, do you want to jump in, and then Ms. Freeland?
Let me make 2 points. One is you have to be able to do more than one thing at one time as Prime Minister. So that means building the economy. It means negotiating with allies, leveraging our critical minerals, leveraging our clean energy with those allies. That's critically important. And hitting hard with a real negotiation with President Trump, which includes dollar-for-dollar tariffs, includes using all the cards potentially that we have, and they are considerable, as the U.S.'s largest client.
But yesterday,
let me get Ms. Freeland in first, and then just one second, Ms. Freeland, and then I'll come to you, Ms. Gould.
Recognize about President Trump is, with him, weakness is a provocation, and capitulation is not a negotiating strategy. The great thing is, right now, Canadians get it. There is this wave of patriotism in Canada, and Canadians are going to stand and fight for Canada. They need a leader who knows how to lead that fight and rally that wave of patriotism. I'm the leader who can do that.
Ms. Gould.
Thank you. Well, one thing that I would like to ask Mr. Carney, because yesterday he made some mentions of sectors that he would protect over others. And I think what is really important is to understand which sectors you're willing to protect, but which sectors you would negotiate away. And that is something that I think as Canadians we need to understand, because as Prime Minister, I'm not going to negotiate any of those sectors away. I'm going to stand up for people in every single province and territory, every single sector, to make sure that we protect Canadian jobs and protect our industries.
Okay, as moderator, all due respect, I'm going to try to ask the questions, but I am going to give Mr. Carney the opportunity to respond to that as well, Ms.
So let me be clear about a few things. One, not everyone would have watched the debate last night. So in a negotiation, if there are things that should never enter into the negotiation, language, culture, our water, you make clear at the start of the negotiation that they are off the table. Second thing is that the other aspects, for example, our auto sector, I'll give an example, which is intimately and interconnected with the United States. We're going to negotiate around maintaining a good deal for our auto sector. But that is not the same as accepting a bad deal, Karina.
Well, actually, when it comes to the auto sector,
10 seconds
in the previous NAFTA negotiation, we got a better deal than we had before. We changed the rules of origin for car parts that it gave an advantage to high-wage Canadian workers. That's the kind of approach we need to take.
Ms. Gould, do you want 10 seconds before we move on?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, we are going to move on then. Thank you. That was a great, fulsome debate. We're going to move on to the next section where it's a 1-minute response for this question. So Donald Trump said again yesterday, I'm sure we all know, the 25% tariffs are coming on March the 4th. Only days later, one of you will become the Prime Minister of this country. What is your first move? And again, this was drawn ahead of time. And Mr. Baylis, your start.
So first of all, I don't take him at his word. He said March 4th, but I would expect him to hit us beforehand, and I expect him to hit us again. What he's going to do is look at industries where he has overcapacity in the United States, because he'll be thinking that's going to hurt the American economy the least, I should say. So where I'm going to be looking at softwood lumber, and I'm going to be looking at dairy as the next two industries he's going to attack. And what we're going to be doing is supporting those industries completely. We're not going to let them take our jobs away. And we're going to be putting into place very intelligent counter tariffs. And then we're going to be waiting. And we're going to be waiting. Because he's not going to stop until he gets the lesson that he can't get away with this. Then what I am going to do is, as I said, I will go down and meet with President Sheinbaum of Mexico, come together with her and say, listen, let's hold the fort together. Let's call him on his 25% tariff bluff. Let's just call it. Tell him, do it. And let's take everything that he already took from us off the table.
Mr. Baylis, thank you. Ms. Freeland, you're up next. And again, days later, it's you that becomes Prime Minister. What is your first move?
My first move is dollar for dollar retaliation. And let me be very clear with President Trump. If I am Prime Minister, I will not flinch. We will retaliate. If you hit us, we will hit back. But our retaliation will be a lot smarter than their dumb tariffs. And it's the Wall Street Journal, usually a supporter of Trump, that described this Trump effort as dumb. Canada, by contrast, is going to be smart. We are going to have a targeted retaliation that exerts maximum pain in the U.S. and does minimum harm to us. We're going to hit Trump's best friends. I will impose a 100% tariff on Teslas. I'm going to hit Wisconsin dairy. I'm going to hit Florida orange juice. And you are going to see a stock market reaction. You're going to see people like the American Farm Bureau complaining about the Canadian potash they need that costs more. And that reaction, that pain, will cause Trump ultimately to back down, just like he did last time.
Ms. Gould, you're up next. Only days later, you become Prime Minister. What's your first move?
My very first move is to call a meeting with the Council of the Federation and bring the premiers together to make sure that we share our plan for Canada, because this is every single province and territory, every business leader in our country, every union leader, every single Canadian, and then to share the plan with the entire country, because Canadians deserve to know what we are doing. Absolutely, we retaliate against Donald Trump. We do a major Team Canada approach in the United States where we engage with American leaders, but also American citizens, because it is American citizens who are going to feel the impact of these tariffs. And we need to let them know that this is not Canada's decision. This is the decision of the United States. And I'm going to call on Canadians to stop going to Florida, to stop buying Florida orange juice, because that's a $50 billion economy in that state alone. Canadians matter to the United States.
Ms. Gould, thank you kindly. Mr. Carney, days later, you become Prime Minister. What's your first move?
Well, I'll pick up on a few things. First, entirely agree with what Karina just said. First item, I would call it a First Ministers meeting as opposed to Council of Federations, but First Ministers meeting, sharing the plan, but also developing our broader response, our broader domestic response, including project. Secondly, entirely agree with Chrystia. Dollar for dollar tariffs, maximum impact on the United States, minimal impact here in Canada. Thirdly, put them on notice on the broader aspects of our commercial relationship. We are their largest supplier of energy. We are their largest supplier of electricity. We are their largest supplier of uranium. I could go on, but I will exhaust all my time. There is the first signs in the United States now of the economic impact of the Trump policies. We will amplify that, and that will begin to create the leverage. and then I will call President Trump.
And then you'll call President Trump.
Well, it's going to be a long day.
Okay, Mr. Carney, thank you. Ms. Gould, this is a 5-minute section, and I'm going to start with you on this. Others can jump in, again, if we can try not to talk over each other. Ms. Gould, what do you think Canada should be doing with our allies? And we did hear some discussion in the opening statements about this, given the shifting geopolitical sands around the globe.
Well, look, I mentioned that over the past week, Donald Trump has been negotiating away Ukraine's sovereignty and their territorial integrity. We saw President Trump abandon the free world throughout this process. We absolutely need to shore up our allies with democracies around the world because our democracy is under threat. We need to protect the values that we care about. What does that look like? It means reaching the 2% NATO target, not because the US asked us to, but because we need to as Canadians. It means making sure that we stand up for our values around the world, that we continue with our important international assistance. We saw Trump take away from USAID. Canada can't fill that void, but we can maintain our commitments. And it means making sure that we live our values on a daily basis on the international scene. The world needs Canada, and Canada will be there for the world.
Ms. Freeland?
It's a great question because what is different about this unleashed and empowered President Trump is he is clearly threatening our sovereignty, and we need to respond. For the first time, the US, rather than guaranteeing, for the first time since the Second World War, rather than guaranteeing the rules-based order, the US is turning predator. And so what Canada needs to do is work closely with our democratic allies, our military allies. I've been foreign minister. I know how to do that. That's why I would start with our Nordic partners, specifically Denmark, which is also being threatened, and our European NATO allies. I would be sure that France and Britain were there, who possess nuclear weapons. And I would be working urgently with those partners to build a closer security relationship that guarantees our security in a time when the United States can be a threat. And I would also, crucially, reach out to our Asian democratic partners, Japan, South Korea, Australia. They need to be part of the conversation too. We need to be ready for a world where the US is not the leader of the free world anymore. Canada can be and must be a leader in building this new order. Our allies are looking to us. And if we do this, we'll make ourselves safer as well.
Mr. Baylis.
Yeah, thank you. So we're in a lucky position in the sense that Donald Trump has targeted many other countries, European Union, we've talked about the other ones as well. So we can use this to our advantage. Now we can say to them, let's get together and target Donald Trump and target some of his industries. I'll give you an example. So Boeing Airlines, they have to sell planes all around the world, and they have competitors that can also compete with them and sell planes we can buy from Embraer, we can buy from Airbus and that. So we should get together with them and say, look, we're going to bankrupt Boeing. The Canadian government should also do this. Under the same guise that he's using to impose these tariffs on us, we should say, you know what? It's an emergency situation, and we got to relook at our defense spending, where we're buying planes from the United States. We're buying all kinds of defense industry products from the United States. And you know what? We're going to put them on hold for now, and if this continues for a couple more weeks, we're going to cancel them. We start this process, other people follow us, it will hit them exactly where it hurts.
Mr. Carney.
Well, it's interesting. I was asked a question a few weeks ago. I was in Amherst, Nova Scotia, and I was asked a question by some British journalists about whether the UK and Europe could avoid the impact of President Trump. And I said, good luck with that. Now they're beginning to see the impact. We've seen it through Ukraine and elsewhere. So there is an opportunity, in fact, a necessity, an imperative here, for us to work with like-minded countries on the new security architecture. Yes, we have to step up for our contribution. How we protect our Arctic, which is under threat not just now from the Russians and the Chinese, but from potential US incursions. Serious, serious issue. We have to work on our, I'll call it our data architecture, how we're going to handle artificial intelligence. Last point, because a lot of people want to come in.
Yep.
We need to leverage all of our assets from critical minerals to clean energy and well beyond to harden those partnerships in Europe and in Asia with like-minded.
Ms. Gould.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you to my colleagues, I think, for some very interesting ideas. Mark, you talked about reaching NATO targets, but of all of us on stage, you plan to reach those not until 2030, but the imperative to do that is now. You talked about the fact that the Arctic is under threat. We don't have time to wait for this. We have to actually make sure that we are investing here in Canada, reaching those targets, because our country, our sovereignty is under threat, and we are in a new world. And so the time to make those investments is now.
I do have a question about the targets coming up, so we will get to that. And just finally on this topic, Ms. Freeland.
I do believe we need to hit 2% by 2027, and we need to be focused on spending the money here in Canada with Canadian companies. But I want to be sharing a message from all of us directly with President Trump. What you are hearing from the Liberal Party of Canada is our sovereignty is not negotiable, Canada is not for sale. We are going to stand with all Canadians and not become the 51st state. And Pierre Poilievre wants to imitate you, but we are going to defeat him, and together we're going to fight for Canada.
So guess what? That question's coming up right now, Ms. Gould, so we can follow up. Mr. Carney, I'll give you the opportunity, because today the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, announced 2.5% of their GDP for defense spending by 2027. Everybody has spoken about boosting our own GDP in different years, so we'll clarify with you. Would you do the same? 2.5% by 2027?
Well, look, the first thing, we're starting from a different position than the UK is, but it also goes to the heart of what we're trying to accomplish. I think this goes to a fundamental point about how to manage government. The outcome here is securing Canada to protect Canadians. Now, I was born in the Arctic, born in the Northwest Territories. I know it well. I know the imperative. The imperative in the Arctic is to have at least 2 new bases in the Arctic, probably Tuktoyaktuk and Inuktitut. We need to build out on NORAD. We need to build out cyber capabilities. We need to build out our frontier. The core point, I will spend defense dollars in Canada, not the 80% that this government has spent in the United States up until now. 80% of capital's defense dollars have gone to the United States. I will spend them in Canada, and I will spend them as rapidly as possible to secure for Canadians. But that is a management thing. It's not an arbitrary target.
Ms. Gould makes a good point, though. You had mentioned, I think, 2030.
I said by 2030.
Right.
And I said, when I said it, that we will do faster if we can deploy it faster in Canada. This is a management point. This is a core point about delivering security. And that is the issue, not just pushing money out the door.
1 minute for you, Ms. Freeland.
I think what it is about is will and a plan and commitment to defend our country. So I've put forward a plan to hit 2% by 2027. It is critical that we spend that money here in Canada on Canadian companies, and we need to be thinking about the next generation of warfare, as we're seeing in Ukraine. Drones, AI, these are really important. Our 2% should not be about sending checks to the United States. Critically, we need a plan to defend our own borders, very particularly the Arctic, and we need to be working with our Nordic and EU NATO partners. They have nuclear weapons. We need to say to them, we need a plan to protect and defend our shared Arctic without the US, and Canada will step up because it's our sovereignty that's at stake as well.
Mr. Baylis, you have 1 minute now.
Yeah, so about a year ago, I published a letter and said that we should meet our 2% GDP in defense spending and that we should do it by 2030. That was a 6-year time frame. And even at 6 years, to do it intelligently, it's actually quite compressed. So anybody can spend money and everybody can waste money. But to do it intelligently and such that it impacts and comes into Canada and we're buying Canadian products, Canadian services and that's not as easy. So I can't say that we would get to 2% in 3 or 4 years. I don't think that's doable in an intelligent way. There are some things we can do, which I did say, which is we should pay our armed forces much better. We're not doing that. We need to raise their pays, raise their benefits. Then I proposed something called CARD, which is the Canadian Agency for Advanced Research in Defense. And this is taking something that the Americans do, and they have their program called DARPA. So I'm copying that program where they invest in research and development in Canadian companies. They develop something, now we see it's working, then we can procure it. So I want to make the spending, but it won't happen that fast.
Okay, Ms. Gould, now over to you.
Thank you, Hannah. So, I mean, I think you hear from all of us that we want to increase our defense spending. It's just a matter of who's going to do it in the timely way that we need to do it. And I'm committed to doing it by 2027. And there are two ways that we can do this. First, by increasing the salaries of our Canadian Armed Forces. We do not pay our military personnel a sufficient wage in this country, and they are there for us when we need them most. And so we need to pay them more. That's something that I would do immediately as Prime Minister. Second, what can we do? You know, Mr. Carney talked about military procurement, but our military procurement isn't working. We have a lot of orders on the docket. We need a procurement czar to get those orders moving. And while I entirely agree with a Made in Canada solution, we need to ensure that our troops have the equipment, the tools, and the resources that they need to fight and protect us here at home and around the world.
Okay, this isn't a debate period, but I do see everybody wants to jump in. Ms. Freeland and then Mr. Carney.
I just want to push back against the idea that managerial or technocratic obstacles should get in the way of defending Canada. We really need to act with the fierce urgency of now. We need to recognize President Trump has said dozens of times he wants us to be the 51st state. I don't think any of us wants to be the leader who was asleep at the wheel and didn't get Canada defended, did not work with our democratic allies to protect our borders. They want to work with us. It's time for us to step up at home, to urgently reach out to them and build a new world order where democracy and Canadian sovereignty is protected.
Mr. Carney, you're up next.
I'm going to associate myself, I'm going to agree with that. The only amendment I'm going to make is, unfortunately, it won't be a world order. It will be a subset of the world order because the number of like-minded countries is much smaller with the U.S. exiting. But I want to make an important point because a huge element of securing Canada is going to be related to information warfare. It's going to be related to cyber. It's going to be related to artificial intelligence. And it's crucial that we're in Montreal. We're in one of the centers of artificial intelligence excellence. There are others in this country. It's crucial that we're building those capabilities on Canadian technologies, to Canadian values, to protect Canadians, because we can't rely on foreign suppliers for them. That is one of the new realities that are there. So the natural approach here is gone. And that's one of the main priorities I would have in terms of securing Canada.
Mr. Baylis, jump in there.
Yeah, so I'd like to give you an example of how we can do this intelligently and how we can do it the wrong way. If we try and push tens and tens of billions of dollars out the door within 3 years for government procurement of defense, it's going to be wasted. It's going to be splashed all over the place, and we're not going to get what we need. The program that I'm calling for, CARD, Canadian Agency for Advanced Research and Defense, what we would do, I'll give you an example with respect to drones. Right here in Quebec, we have a very strong aerospace industry. So we would give out 5 or 6 research contracts, and none of this, by the way, is subject to our trade agreements, and see who comes up with the best drone. And once we have that, then we can go and say, we're going to buy that from you. But to develop it and get it done like that, that's not going to happen. So if we try to do this too quickly, we're going to be wasting money, and we're going to be wasting an excellent opportunity to build Canadian industry.
Ms. Gould.
Thank you. I would push back gently on that to say that getting our troops the equipment and the supplies and the tools they need to defend Canada is not wasted money. It's actually imperative for them to defend and protect us in this time. But Mark brought up an interesting point about capabilities here in Canada. And as the Minister of Democratic Institutions, I put in place Canada's first ever and only plan to protect our country from cyber attacks in our democracy. And as part of that, I know that we have one of the premier cybersecurity institutions through the CSE here in Canada. But what we don't have is our own intelligence agency that can work to collect foreign intelligence. Now might be the time that we need to establish those capabilities. We heard earlier today that the Americans had thought about removing Canada from our Five Eye partnership. We rely too much on the Americans for intelligence internationally, and we need to ensure that Canada has the capacity and the capability to protect ourselves, to work with democratic partners, and to ensure more than anything, we are protecting Canadians, Canadian industry, and our economy at a time of intense cyber espionage. And this is something that is an important policy for today in 2025.
Ms. Freeland, jump in there.
You know, I really believe in Canada and Canadians, and there is this wave of passion in our country to defend our country. One of the reasons that I decided to run for the leadership is I had a conversation after Trump made his 51st state threat with a couple of very brilliant young technologists who worked with Jeff Hinton, the Nobel Prize-winning father of AI. And they said to me, we know what's happening in Ukraine, and we see how technologists are leading the fight. We are patriotic Canadians. We believe in our country. We need a government that gets that invests in us, because we are ready to stand on guard for Canada. And that is the approach we need to take. I think we need to have confidence that Canadians, empowered and led by a government that believes in them, will do this.
Mr. Carney.
Okay. This is a crucial conversation. And I'm really heartened by both the seriousness, the range of ideas, but I'm going to bring up one related aspect, which Karina just touched on, which is about foreign interference in our democratic institutions. And the responsibility of all politicians, particularly leaders of parties, and certainly a prime minister, is to be fully briefed on these issues. Pierre Poilievre hasn't ever bothered to get his security clearance. I've already, during this leadership campaign, filled out my forms. It wasn't that hard to do, I have to say, and put them in, and I fully expect to get it in the near future. This is the kind of irresponsibility at a time when our country is under threat that we cannot afford. We cannot afford a leader like Pierre Poilievre.
Mr. Baylis?
I'd like to just do two things. First of all, clarification on Ms. Gould. I put out my defense plan before yours, and in it, I made it very clear that I was going to raise salaries, but that's not going to spend tens of billions of dollars. Having said that, what we do need to do is increase enrollment, and that will come by getting better salaries and benefits. And also, there's another area where I'd like to see a step up, where we've really fallen far behind. We're down to 33 UN peacekeepers in the world. This is not acceptable for Canada, the country that brought peacekeeping to the world. So I'd like to really invest in recruiting, strengthening the number of people in our armed forces, and putting some out in peacekeeping roles.
I want to thank you all. That was a great first theme. We are going to move on now to the second theme of this evening. And this is going to be a question for all of you. It's a 1-minute question. And I'm going to start with Mr. Carney this time. So Canadians are living in tough economic times. As Prime Minister, what would your priority be to strengthen our economy?
Well, I think I'll start my answer by saying this will be one of my top priorities, jointly with these issues that we just touched on, largely with the U.S. and the threats to our security. A focus on building our economy on several layers. First and foremost, this is a time to build. We have an enormous opportunity to build our economy. That means building millions of homes. We're millions of homes short in this country. Everyone who's trying to buy a home is aware of that, particularly young. It's building infrastructure, both conventional energy infrastructure and clean energy infrastructure. It's building up on the conversation we just had, on intelligence infrastructure. It is diversifying our trade partners with new trading routes, and it's creating one Canadian economy instead of 13. That's what's necessary to move this country forward from where we are today, which has become quite a weak position economically.
We will dig into some of those topics a bit more. Ms. Gould, you're up next.
Thanks. Thanks, Hannah. I think your question was actually about the cost of living for Canadians. It wasn't about, the macroeconomic picture, which we know is doing okay for Canada. But when Canadians, people, don't feel like that, it's not working for them. I'm glad to hear, my colleague talk about housing. It's one of the first times I've heard him talk about it during this campaign. I put out a very bold, ambitious plan on housing that would eliminate homelessness, that would build millions of homes, and that would help first-time homebuyers get into the market. I've proposed a 1% GST tax cut from 5 to 4% to help Canadians with the immediate cost of everything. And I've put forward a plan to modernize our social safety net and put us on a path towards a basic income. Canadians are struggling. We need to help them make ends meet. That's what leadership looks like, and that's what the economy means to me. It's about people.
Ms. Gould, thank you. Mr. Baylis, you're up for a minute.
Yes, I put together a plan, an economic plan. I call it my prosperity plan, and I'm going to bring fiscal discipline to Ottawa. And yes, we're going to have to stop running deficits. It has a direct impact on the value of our dollar, and that has a direct impact on affordability. So I will not be cutting the GST. I'm going to modernize our healthcare system to get it to do a lot better with less. That's our biggest spend for provinces, our biggest transfer from the federal government. I'm going to increase productivity. This is something I know from my work in business, but it's something as well that I'm going to bring to government. And also, I'm going to do a lot of procurement as much as possible within our trade rules from Canadian companies. Together, this is going to put us on the right path. Now, people say, what date? What date, Frank, are you going to end deficits? I can't give you a date, but what I can say is this. We're going to stop going down this pathway, and we're going to start going down this pathway of budgetary balanced budgets. And this is going to raise our dollar, and that'll be better for everyone in the long run.
Okay, and 1 minute now to Ms. Freeland.
All economic plans today have to start with an effective response to President Trump. He is the biggest economic menace our country and Canadians are facing. I have a plan to make us united, strong, and smart, and to win. I think we also all recognize that President Trump is also handing us a golden opportunity. Canadians right now really get how wonderful Canada is, and they understand we're under threat. And so today we have a chance, a once-in-a-generation chance, to make Canada stronger, richer, more prosperous, more resilient. I'm going to seize that opportunity. I'm going to cut interprovincial trade barriers. I'm going to cut red tape and get things built. I'm going to use government procurement not to send checks to the US, but to invest in Canadian jobs and Canadian companies. That's how we make Canada stronger, more resilient. That's how we stand up to President Trump.
We are going to move into the 5-minute section, so I'm just going to lead off with a question, but I'm sure you may have things you want to jump in on each candidate. Mr. Carney, you will start this 5-minute debate. Others can jump in. Last year in Canada, there were over 2 million visits to food banks. That's the highest in our history. For people who are at home, how would you make it more affordable for them?
Okay. I would like to come back to some of the points raised, but this is such an important issue. I'll go straight to affordability. You know, what's happened in this economy over the last 5 years is that people's wages have not kept up with the rise in prices. So we've had the average family of 4, their food basket has gone up by more than 25%. Their wages haven't kept pace with that. So, and we see the growth in food banks, but we see everyday middle-class families struggling as a consequence of it. So a huge range of things need to be done to improve affordability. And let me list some of those because they're crucial. The first thing is my government will make a middle-class tax cut. Secondly, my government will remove, as Ms. Freeland will, remove the GST for first-time home buyers. This is a crucial point, getting on the home ladder. We need to, if we have one Canadian economy, we can reduce prices by 15%. If we have greater competition in our economy, which my government will deliver, in groceries, in broadband, in transportation, that will bring prices down. That will help people move ahead. So we have to tackle the affordability issue across the board. Last point, absolutely have to keep in place the progress that the government has made on crucial things such as childcare, on dental care, and farmer care, because that helps those who are most vulnerable.
We'll talk a little bit about healthcare soon too. Ms. Gould, you're up next.
Thank you, Hannah. You know, when my colleagues talk about households, I talk about families. When they talk about, you know, the macro picture, I talk about what it means for individuals. And I'm so proud that I was able to deliver affordable childcare for families across this country. And I would expand that to include before and after school care as well. But when we're talking about people who are going to food banks, we're talking about the most vulnerable in our society. A middle-class tax cut or removing the GST on new homes isn't going to help those folks. But you know what will? Modernizing our social safety net, making sure that seniors who live on a fixed income, persons with disabilities, folks who have lost their job, who need support to retrain and rebound, are better off. And that's why I'm talking about opening a path towards a basic income. Poverty costs money. That's why we need to work to eliminate homelessness. It's why I would work with provinces and territories to have specific accords to ensure that folks who get into housing can stay stable and that they can enter the workforce and join and be prosperous. We need to tackle poverty in this country. It is urgent for us to do, and it is something that I am promising that I will work on with Canadians to ensure that every person in this country has a real, viable opportunity for success.
Ms. Freeland, you're up next.
I am so glad to have childcare mentioned. As finance minister, one of the things I was so grateful to be able to do was to introduce in my first budget a national system of early learning and childcare. And it was wonderful to work first with Ahmed Hussein, get that first crucial deal with BC and a bunch more. And then Ahmed handed the baton to Karina, and we worked together. This is generational. It's transformational for Canada. My affordability plan includes 100,000 more childcare places. It includes a middle-class tax cut. It includes a cut on credit card fees. It includes a cut on taxes for first-time home buyers. And the critical thing for us to all remember is the real threat to Canadian families, the real threat to people working really hard and struggling to get by is not anyone on this stage. It is Pierre Poilievre. He will cut, cut, cut. He will bring in a cruel austerity that will hurt all the people in Canada who need the help the most. And that's why I'm proud to be a Liberal, and that's why I'm running to be the next leader of our party.
Mr. Baylis, I'm trying to pick up some time here. 30 seconds to you, and then I'm going to come over to you, Mr.
So you mentioned food banks. I've actually been on the board of directors of a food bank for 11 years. And you'll note that was over the time that I was a member of parliament. So normally I stepped off all boards because you don't want to politicize them. But the food bank said, Frank, we don't care. We need your help. Please stay on the board. So I understand this intimately. Now, what tends to happen with politicians, they did it this time. They brought the grocery store owners in and they yelled at them and screamed at them. But the reality is this. If you want to buy an orange, that grocery store has to go buy it in the United States in US dollars, bring it to Canada, convert it to Canadian dollars. Every time our dollar goes down, that price of that orange goes up. Now, if we want to get that done, working, we need to bring our dollar up and bring oranges, bananas, everything else down. That's the solution.
Mr. Carney?
I want to be clear, and Canadians feel this. I want to be clear about the, quote, strength of our economy. Our economy over the last 5 years has been driven by a big increase in the labor force, which was largely because of a surge in immigration that is now trying to be controlled, and by government spending that grew over 9% year after year after year, twice the rate of growth of our economy. Okay? So our economy was weak before we got to the point of these threats from President Trump. That's why we need big changes. That's the reason I'm here. That's why we need big changes to how we're managing this economy. I want to make one last point, which goes to workers. My plan, it's a time to build across this economy. We can go into more detail. It is going to be a great time going forward to be a worker in Canada. It is going to be a great time to be in the trades in Canada because we are going to build this country across this country for Canadians and with Canadians.
Ms. Gould, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. We are out of time, but I want to...
Look, I'm not going to talk down Canada. I am only ever going to be a champion for this country. And when it comes to the question that was asked about poverty, we actually have to talk about people in poverty and what their lived experience is. When I was the Minister of Families, I worked on a national school food program that is now going to be supporting thousands of kids across this country and delivered childcare. But let's be clear, poverty costs us money, and investing to tackle and end poverty, like things like the Canada Child Benefit or increasing senior supports, is going to benefit all of us.
Okay, and 30 seconds to you, Ms. Freeland, and then we'll move on.
I just want to say really quickly that we need to be really careful not to repeat conservative talking points. Canada most definitely is not broken. We are a strong, resilient country. Canadians live 4 years longer than Americans, and median wealth in Canada is higher than in the US. Trump is giving us an opportunity to make a strong economy even stronger and more resilient. And I think as Liberals, we have to remember the great legacy of Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin. We are the party that believes in social policy and economic policy. We know how to deliver jobs and growth, and we know how to support people. We believe in both, and that is the kind of party and that is the kind of government I will lead as Prime Minister.
We're going to have one more 1 minute issue, and we can talk about all of the other stuff in that as well. So I'm going to start, this is supposed to be with Ms. Freeland as well on this one because it was previously drawn. As Prime Minister, and we're coming back to what we were talking about when it comes to managing the nation's books, how would you manage the nation's books at this critical time? And of course, you were the former finance minister.
Yeah, well, I would start by pushing back very forcefully against conservatives who talk Canada down. The reality is Canada has a strong fiscal position. We have a AAA credit rating, and we have the lowest debt and the lowest deficit in the G7. That was important for me to maintain a fiscally responsible position because I know that we have needed to keep our fiscal firepower dry because I saw that Trump was coming. Today, we need to seize the opportunity that Trump presents us to harness this wave of Canadian patriotism and to build a Canadian economy which is even stronger with more jobs, more investment, more prosperity. And critically, we need to remember that standing up to Trump is the foundation of all economic policies, and there could be some pain involved. The government has to be there to support workers, to support businesses. As Prime Minister, you have my commitment that I'll do that.
Mr. Baylis, your 1 minute starts now.
So as I mentioned, I'm going to bring fiscal discipline to Ottawa. Now, when I say that, a lot of people think, okay, is he going to cut services or he's going to raise taxes? It's neither. There's a third option, which is to increase productivity. So if we increase productivity, we increase richness, we increase our tax base and everything. Now, as a business owner, I've done that. When I brought a company from 2 people to 1,000. I know how to invest intelligently to increase productivity. Added to that, as I mentioned, I've also been elected. So I'm the one person here that understands both sides of the coin. And I'm going to use that skill set to then say, okay, how do we put in place government programs that are going to help the economy work, government programs that are going to be à la bénéfice, to the benefit of businesses, and take away ones that are hurting, such as, for example, I wrote well over a year ago that the increase in capital gains was a very bad idea because it goes against what we want. It discourages investments when we want to encourage them.
And Ms. Gould, you're up next.
Thank you, Hannah. Look, I'm all for increasing productivity. And in fact, last week, I announced a plan to create 1 million new entrepreneurs in this country. I'm the daughter of a small business owner. I grew up working in the family business, and I think we need to unleash that economic potential. But if someone tells you that they're going to balance the books in a very short period of time, increasing our productivity in that period of time is not going to be sufficient. And at a time when we are facing potentially one of the greatest economic shocks our country has experienced, we need to ensure that the government can be there for Canadians, like the federal government was during the pandemic with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, the business loan, as well as the wage subsidy, because we will win against Donald Trump. But we need to ensure that Canadians have the income support they need and the jobs to get to when we eventually win. Thank you.
Mr. Carney, the last in the 1 minute.
Okay. Well, it was my privilege to work with Paul Martin when he balanced the books and kept the books balanced. And one of the lessons of that is the need for government to continue to focus on how effectively it is spending precious taxpayers' dollars. In other words, a focus on the outcomes of programs as opposed to the dollars going in. And one thing you can see is that the scale of increase in spending and the scale of increase in the public service hasn't been matched by greater productivity in certain areas. So the focus does have to go to that in order to create the room and maintain the room for those social programs, because that is what the Liberal Party is about. One of the core things, which is to manage responsibly our fiscal position so that we can support the vulnerable in society, so we can move forward as a society. So we need to spend less and invest more as a country.
We're going to move into a 6-minute debate on this. Yes, because this is something we want to continue to discuss. Ms. Freeland, I'll go to you first on this one. Productivity seems to be sort of a sleeper issue. When you mention it to Canadians, they go, How will you fix productivity in this country?
Well, I think that President Trump is giving us this golden opportunity to fix some of the long-standing, well-known obstacles to Canada being more productive. Interprovincial trade is the standout example, and we now have the will to do it. Recognizing foreign credentials of people who are already here, you know, that famous person we all know who is driving a taxi but is a nurse or a doctor, that's another example. Another one is just cutting red tape to get big projects built. But we're coming to the end of the economic section, and I do want to talk about a part of the economy where there have been huge leaps in productivity, which is central to Canada's resilience and economic strength, particularly as we face up to Donald Trump, and that is rural Canada and our farmers. I am the daughter of a farmer. I grew up on a farm. There are no people in Canada or the world who work harder than farmers. And I do think it's really important for us to have government policies that support our farmers. They give us food security. They are an important source of strength when it comes to this standoff with the US. And we need to be very clear with Canada's dairy farmers that we will stand for supply management. I mean, isn't it a good thing that we produce our own milk, our own eggs, our own butter, our own cheese, that we're not dependent on US factory farms for that? So we need to remember and stand with our farmers.
Ms. Gould, you're next, please.
Thank you, Hannah. Look, Chrystia, I'm really glad you mentioned the rural economy and agriculture. One of the first things I would do as Prime Minister in my speech from the throne is to ensure that we protect supply management. It was a piece of legislation that unfortunately died when we prorogued Parliament, but I think it is imperative that we protect our supply managed sectors. But I think one of the frustrations that rural Canada has had with us as a government is that we haven't spoken enough about sectors in rural Canada, whether that is mining, whether that is energy, whether that is agriculture, whether that is forestry. And for us, we have to really ensure that when we talk about productivity, we're not just talking about new sectors, we're talking about existing sectors. And this is where AI can be used as a tool to enhance productivity in those sectors. And that's something that I'm really excited about. But one thing that I do want to mention, and Mark, I'm glad you talked about Paul Martin, because I know you were a really excellent Deputy Minister of Finance who did really good work, is that we also need to remember that the economy is about people. It's not just numbers or points on a graph. It's about how do we make the economy work for people. And Hannah, your question about productivity, what does that mean to the average Canadian when they're saying, I can't afford my groceries and I'm having a hard time paying my rent? We need to talk about the things that matter to Canadians, not because we're talking as politicians, but because we're talking as people who understand and experience what they're going through. Okay. And that's something that I bring to the table.
Okay, I'm going to have to stick to time on this topic. Mr. Baylis, you wanted to jump in on that, and then Mr. Carney after that.
So when we talk about productivity, one of the first places I'm going to look at is the federal government itself. That's when I talked about modernizing the federal government, one of my 3 priorities. I'll give you an example here. Revenue Canada is the biggest pain point for both individuals and businesses in trying to pay their taxes. This is ridiculous. This is such a waste of time, and that wasted time directly impacts their productivity. So I'm going to fix Revenue Canada. I'm going to get it working the way it should work, because the people that are calling and trying to work with Revenue Canada are good people. They're trying to pay their taxes. Other things I'm going to do. I'm going to build 2 pipelines, 2 gas pipelines to get our great Alberta natural gas to the East Coast and the West Coast. That's going to have a huge impact on our economy. It's going to diversify us away from reliance just on the Americans. And yes, it's going to have a very positive impact on the world's environmental situation, because it'll allow our Asian and our European allies to come off of coal and oil and start using a much cleaner fuel, liquid natural gas, from Alberta.
Mark Carney.
Okay, one of the reasons why families have a hard time to afford their groceries is because we haven't had productivity. That's the issue. It's that their wages aren't keeping pace with prices. That's because they're not being given the right tools to work with. We're not working as smart as we should. So that's the challenge that we're talking about. And that's the result, and that's the connection. As Prime Minister, you need to make the connection between policies that make that difference that go to families. So both are connected. A couple quick points. Number one Canadian economy will drive huge productivity. Secondly, productivity in government, as Frank just says, I won't go on about it, but it's absolutely essential. We have not had the productivity we need in government. Thirdly, the 2 big drivers of productivity going forward will be the energy transition and AI.
Okay, I'm going to give you each 15 seconds. Ms. Freeland, with you first.
Making Canada more productive, which just really means making us all more prosperous, means we have to invest in infrastructure.
Yeah.
We have to invest in physical infrastructure. That's why I'm so supportive of high-speed rail. We also have to invest in social infrastructure. That is infrastructure too. And early learning and childcare is such a great example, because this is a policy which makes life more affordable for families. It makes kids smarter because it's so high quality, and it adds to the labor force without requiring any new homes. So physical infrastructure, social infrastructure, and we have the national will to really do this, because we know we need to be more resilient, because we're at this critical moment for our country, facing the need to stand up to Trump and defend our sovereignty and our economy.
That was not 15 seconds, but we'll try again. Karina Gould, 15 seconds for you, and then I am going to give Mr. Baylis 15 as well.
The job of Prime Minister is to connect with Canadians, and it's to ensure that you are placing the priorities of Canadians at the center of everything that you do. That's why tackling things like homelessness and housing affordability actually make people's lives more affordable. That's the job of being a politician. It's putting the human face on policy.
Mr. Baylis, 15 seconds.
So with respect to productivity, I'm one of those people that says, what's best practices? Now, one of the leaders in productivity in the world is Ireland, and they have a very clear axiom, a belief: capital gains should be lower, because it encourages investments. Whether you're on the right or the left of the spectrum, they all know that. They keep their capital gains tax very low, and that encourages the investments that they need for productivity.
Literally 5 seconds, Mr. Carney.
It's time to build. We should support builders, and those are people who take risk for our country.
Okay, we are going to move on to our third theme this evening. I want to thank you for that last one. It was a really good debate. And we're going to start with you, Ms. Gould, on this one. This is a 1 minute, so each of you are going to get 1 minute to respond to this. In 2015, Justin Trudeau swept to power in large part because young Canadians, they liked him, they voted for him, but fast forward to today, that age group is really moving towards the right. What will you do as Prime Minister to win back the support of that age group?
Thanks, Hannah. Well, maybe the debate so far is indicative of why young people are not supporting the Liberals right now, because we're not talking about the issues that matter to them. We talked a little bit about housing, but that's one of the biggest challenges that young people are facing right now. My plan to really supercharge our housing investments, but also to ensure that young people can actually enter the housing market, will make a difference in that regard. We're not talking about the cost of living, on how challenging it is to be a young person these days, and the dream of owning a home or having that prosperity that's just not there. And if I can be honest, one of the things that we did was we lost trust of younger people because we weren't focused on the issues that mattered to them. And so my pledge as Prime Minister is to ensure that I am building a future for you as young people and for future generations.
Thank you, Ms. Gould. Frank Baylis, you're up next.
So for young people, there's a few things that are critically important. First of all, let's talk about education. We've done something very silly. By the way, my 1 minute is not on. Should it be on?
I'll keep track.
Okay, sorry about that. So,
That was very honest.
yeah.
There we
okay,
go.
There we go.
And you'll get those extra seconds.
No problem. So what I was going to say is that, first of all, I want to see real investments in our universities. We've been squeezing our universities, and quite frankly, that's the dumbest thing we should be doing because that's the foundation of an advanced economy. So I want young people to know that I will be completely supporting your education. Second thing is, they are the ones that are going to find it hardest to buy a home. So we need to help them buy a home. And there's two things we can do. Well, there's many things, but two things that I'm proposing is to increase the amount for the first home savings account. It hasn't kept up with inflation and that. So we need to increase the amount of money that people can put aside so they can buy a home. And the second thing we need to do is really keep the investments going, which have been lacking for so long, in social housing. The government's got out of social housing, and there's a knock-on effect that affects everybody when that happens. So we need to get back into social housing. We need to help young people buy their homes. And what we need to do, when I get the government in order, what will happen is you'll have more money in your pocket. It'll take a little bit of time, but you will be able to buy a home.
Ms. Freeland, your 1 minute is now.
Well, I was there in 2015. I had been a backbench MP for 2 years, and I remember how electric that campaign was. And the reason we won, at the heart of it, was we recognized the pain that middle-class Canadians, including young Canadians, were feeling. And we recognized and identified that Stephen Harper led a lackluster recovery from the 2008 financial crisis. We pointed that out and we said we are going to invest for jobs and growth. Today, we need to do the same thing and we need to focus on affordability for young people. I have a plan to do that. Cut taxes for first-time homebuyers, cut taxes for the middle class, 100,000 new childcare places, cap credit card fees. We need to be there for young Canadians so that they can know if they work hard, study hard in the free trade schools I will offer them, they can have a great Canadian middle-class life.
Mr. Carney, you're next.
Okay. Are we going to talk about housing?
We're getting there.
Okay, good. Because housing is central to this, but I want to add to the opportunity set for younger Canadians, which has shrunk in recent years. Let's expand it. Let's expand it in all aspects of what we're doing. First and foremost, it's a time to build, as Ms. Freeland just said, focus on infrastructure, building this economy out. There is a huge range of opportunities that comes, as I say, for the next 25 years, being in the trades, fantastic if we follow through with the promise there. That's the first. The second is, as Mr. Baylis said, let's look at our universities. Their funding is being squeezed and has been squeezed, and it's been made up by having foreign students. That's come to an end. We need to be there for our universities or we're going to miss the opportunity. Thirdly, we need broad-based skills training. The federal government has a role there. We need to leverage AI and others to deliver it.
Okay, we are going into a 5-minute debate now. And Ms. Gould, I'm going to start with you again on this one. This is from a Liberal in Ontario, Chrystia. She's asked the question in this survey, how do you plan to make owning a home, and there comes the question about home ownership, feel like a possibility to those stuck in renter's land?
Thank you, Karissa, for that question. So there are two parts of my comprehensive plan on housing. One, create an industrial housing strategy so that we can build millions of new homes. We can use modular homes. We can invest in co-op housing, but also to increase the first-time home buyers incentive. Right now, it's about 5 to 10%. I want to increase that to 50% so that first-time home buyers can actually get into the market, build equity, and buy back that equity over time. But I want to pick up quickly on the last question because I was actually a young person in 2015, and I was excited about what the Liberal Party of Canada was offering, and I was excited about Justin Trudeau's leadership. And you know why? Because it was a bold, ambitious plan for our country. It was progressive. We were going to fight. We fought climate change. We talked about new ideas to move this country forward. And the way that we're going to bring young people back to the party is not by being conservative light and not by being unambitious for Canada. It's going to be by having bold ideas for this country where Canadians feel inspired and hopeful about the future that we're going to have. That's what young people are looking for. They're looking for a hopeful future where those opportunities exist. And, you know, I'm not quite still a young person, although I'm younger. You know, it's that energy, that drive, that optimism for the future that is going to build the best country in the world.
Ms. Freeland, you're up next, please.
So first of all, I want to say, Carissa, thank you very much for being involved and for asking that question. I hear that question from so many younger people who are just frustrated that they're worried that they've lost out on getting into the housing market and maybe the kind of life that their parents had is not going to be available to them. It is absolutely essential for us as a country that we say, we're not going to let that happen. And if young Canadians work hard, have a good job, studied hard, and they want to own a home, we have to make that dream of home ownership achievable. I have a plan to do it. It starts with cutting taxes for first-time home buyers to give them a leg up in the housing market. I'm so glad to hear so many people mentioning the first home savings account. I introduced that as finance minister. I think it is a great way for young people to save for that first home, and I would increase the amount of money that people can put in that first home savings account. Free trade school is going to help people get that first home too, because it will mean there are more skilled tradespeople to build those first homes people need. And then finally, I just want to say, some people are going to want to buy their own home. Some people want to live in affordable housing or maybe a co-op. I lived in a co-op. One of my aunts still lives in the co-op she and my mom helped build. There is, though, someone in Canada who does not believe in affordable housing, who does not believe in co-ops. Pierre Poilievre has actually called them Soviet-style housing. And so we all need to be very, very clear. We must defeat him because some Canadians need affordable housing too.
Mr. Baylis, you're up next.
So I feel for these young people. When I look at the house prices, I shake my head and think, my gosh, when I was buying a house, I thought it was hard. And my first home was $195,000. It's almost shameful to say that now. But back then, buying a home was about 4 times your salary, your annual salary. It's gone up to now 10 times your salary. So what are we going to do about that? Well, we're not going to bring house prices down again. So we need to get your salaries up, and we need to get more money in your pocket, and we need to bring the cost of living back in line. So what I'm proposing to do is there's a number of technical issues, which I've listed on my website, but in a general sense, I would say to young people, start saving. If I become prime minister, I'll get to work on the economy. I'll create the good jobs that you need, just like I've done in my own businesses. You'll have more money in your pockets, and we'll get the cost of living under control. And in a few years, with the home saving plans and that, you will be able to buy a house. So please do not lose hope on that.
Okay, Mr. Carney, I'm going to end this segment on you, please.
Okay, so we need to double the rate of home building in this country. That 10 times salary point, we need to double the rate in order to even have the places for those people. We obviously need to get those incomes up at the same time. So there's 2 questions here. How do we get the rate of home building going from $250,000 a year to $500,000? We're going to need changes to how we build homes, much more technology, much more modular homes. We're going to need a big surge, as was just mentioned, in tradespeople who can build those homes. We're going to need to cut the fees in municipalities for developers. The federal government has a role to play there. We have a housing accelerator fund that's working. I would supercharge that as part of this. And then on the other side of the equation, we need to make it more affordable, particularly for young people, to buy those homes. Now, removing GST on first-time home purchases, that's 5% off the home, which is a substantial proportion of the down payment. There's other financing mechanisms that come with that. But in the end, and let me finish on this will come back to our ability to build a strong economy. It's not just building the homes, it's building the strong economy so people can catch up.
We're going to move on to our next segment. it's not the segment, another theme, but this is an important topic. Canadians are worried they can't access a doctor or a nurse. What would you do as Prime Minister, working with the provinces, of course, because it is provincial jurisdiction, and territories to help solve this issue? And Mr. Carney, you are up first on this one.
Well, this is a crucial issue. Across the country, virtually without exception, in fact, I would say without exception, access to a doctor, in many cases, access to a healthcare professional is not possible. Healthcare is a right in Canada. We are not living up to our commitments. And this is not as simple as saying, I'm not saying you implied this, that it's a provincial jurisdiction. So first and foremost, we have to meet our responsibilities as the federal government in terms of the healthcare transfers, but we have to do a lot more. We have to make sure, and we should be part of this, that healthcare professionals can move across this country as readily. So a nurse in Quebec can go to Alberta, can go to Northwest Territories and practice immediately. We have to make it easier for foreign health professionals to work more rapidly. We have to increase productivity in the health sector. Mr. Baylis has ideas on that, including on portable data, portable health records, which are crucial, but a broader use of AI, and us, last point, us as the federal government, accelerating those changes to deliver what Canadians deserve as Canadians, and we're nowhere close yet.
Ms. Gould, you have 1 minute on the clock now.
Thank you. My goodness. I mean, this is something that every Canadian has experienced.
Yeah.
The anxiety of not being able to have a family doctor, or worried, and what we're seeing across the country is emergency rooms that are closed or that are understaffed, and hallway medicine. This is absolutely a provincial jurisdiction, but the federal government has an important role to play in two regards. When it comes to health transfers, we need greater accountability from provinces, not to the federal government, but to their own citizens on the outcomes and the outcomes that they expect to deliver for their citizens. And then when the federal government can do is convene provinces and territories and colleges to ensure that our healthcare workers can travel across the country, but we also expeditiously can recognize foreign trained doctors and healthcare professionals so that every Canadian has access to a family doctor and the medical specialist that they need when they need it.
Mr. Baylis, your 1 minute is on the clock.
So I've spent 40 years of my career in the healthcare industry, and I can give you examples where I've walked through emergency rooms, down the hallways, and I've seen people in gurneys up and down there, and it's broken my heart. So I'm absolutely committed to fixing the healthcare system. What we need is a change in paradigm. Our system was designed in the 1960s when the population in general was younger, and it was designed for acute care. Now we have a chronic care problem. So we need to redesign our system to treat chronic care. Presently, there's only 2 doorways into the system. If you're lucky, you have a family doctor, and if you're not, what do they tell you to do? Go to the emergency room. So what I want to do is open 3 more doors into the system. I want to go to pharmacists, first of all, and expand their scope of practice. They can do so much. I want them to do a lot more, which they're trained to do. Number 2, I want to train 6,000 nurses to become what we call nurse practitioners. That would allow them to do almost as much as a doctor and have them staffed across the country. And finally, I want to invest in home care.
And Ms. Freeland, 1 minute for you as well.
Well, thank you, Hannah. And I want to start by thanking the great, hardworking people in the Canadian healthcare system. A few days ago, I spoke to a nurse practitioner. Her name was Kathy in Riding Mountain. Hi, Kathy. I hope you're listening. She's a Liberal. And she talked to me about how much she loves her job and cares for her patients, but how much of a strain the strain on the healthcare system imposes on her, too. So thank you very much. We do have to make it better. We have to make it better by training more doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners here in Canada, by recognizing foreign credentials and by allowing credentials to be portable across the country, by inviting the great doctors and nurses, Canadian ones, in the US who want to come home, encouraging them to come home, making it possible. And finally, we need to be clear with Canadians who care about their healthcare system. You cannot trust Pierre Poilievre with our universal single-payer healthcare system. All he believes in is cuts, cuts, cuts. And that is one of the things that motivates me as a Liberal to defeat the Conservatives in the next election.
We are going to go into an open debate section here on this. And Mr. Baylis, yes, I will start with you on this one.
Okay.
I want to ask a follow-up question on it. Is it simply a question of money when it comes to healthcare and transfer payments, increasing that money, because I know provinces would love to have more money for healthcare, or does the structure of the healthcare system need to change?
So a few years ago, the federal government announced something like $40 billion more in healthcare spending, and nobody went, great, finally it's solved. We all shook our heads and said, great, we're just shoveling more money into the fire, because we do need to change the paradigm. Now, the wonderful thing I can tell you is that I have seen the technologies that can do that develop right here in Canada. I'm working with one company I'm supporting, and that they've developed is amazing in terms of electronic medical records, using artificial intelligence to wrap around and read all your records anywhere they are and produce reports accordingly. I've seen other AI developments in Canada again, where they allow doctors to spend a lot less time note-taking, in fact, no time note-taking, and everything collaged put together for them, and doctors can be doctors. So we have the technology here. We have the ability to go forward here. This is what I'm going to bring to the healthcare system. And when I'm done, we are going to have the best healthcare system in the world. Believe it.
Ms. Gould, you're next on this one.
Thank you, Hannah. Look, universal health care and timely access to our health system is something that every Canadian deserves and should have. And it was a Liberal government that put universal health care in place. We can be very, very proud of that legacy. However, when it comes to the actual system, it is the provinces and the territories that manage and deliver care. The federal government provides transfers, but what we don't do enough of, and while I support the increase in transfers that we didn't have enough accountability for where that money was going. It can go into the general revenues of provinces and territories, and we have no way of knowing how that money is spent. And again, it's not to be accountable to the federal government, it's to be accountable to citizens. Citizens deserve to know how that money is being spent and what the outcomes they can expect are. One of the things that I did with the childcare agreements is that all of that money was contingent on specific objectives and outcomes for provinces and territories. That's what we need in healthcare. Canadians deserve timely access to a doctor. They deserve to have a family doctor or a primary care physician. And they deserve to know that when they get sick, when they need the healthcare system, it's there for them. Because our healthcare workers are working around the clock. They are doing everything they can to provide patients the care that they need, but the system itself needs to be modernized. The federal government can convene the provinces and territories. We can work with them to develop those objectives and those outcomes. But at the end of the day, it is the provinces and territories that are responsible for the delivery of healthcare, and they must be accountable to their citizens for how they are doing that.
Mr. Carney, you're up next, please.
So look at the service that we've received from our healthcare professionals over the course of the last 5 years. The enormous strains of working under the pandemic. Then the enormous strains that come after that on these professionals who are there at the front lines for us day in, day out, through the night, of a system that is short on resources, a system that has chronic care challenges as we age. We have a responsibility as the federal government to be part of the solution here. And we have an opportunity to make a systemic change because of technology. And if we have an openness, the provinces have an openness to use that in a way that empowers nurse practitioners, pharmacists, doctors, to provide a broader range of services to more people, more effectively. Last point, the federal government can help with that transition, can help with the leverage, and can help drive that change.
Ms. Freeland.
Well, Hannah, you asked, does money matter? And I do think it's really important for Liberals in particular to be clear, money does matter and money helps. And so I was really glad to be finance minister when we stepped up federal government support for the healthcare system $200 billion, we saw that the healthcare system was under unbearable strain after COVID and that Canadians were suffering, and we stepped up and we made that commitment. I think we also have some real opportunities. Technology is a huge enabler, and I have seen in Toronto, at the University of Toronto, some amazing AI technologies being used to deliver better care in emergency rooms, better care for people after surgery. And not only is the care better, it costs less money and takes less time of trained healthcare professionals. So there are real opportunities. But I just want to conclude by saying something about the provinces. I think that transparency, is the winning ticket here. And having real transparency on healthcare outcomes across the country would help all Canadians, and it would help Canadians to see what's working and what isn't. But I do want to say to the premiers of the provinces and territories, I respect your work running the healthcare systems. It's really, really hard. And as Prime Minister, I would work really collaboratively with you and would recognize you want a healthcare system that works too, and you are the ones who are running it.
We are going to give 15 seconds to Ms. Gould and 15 seconds to Mr. Baylis before moving into the next theme.
Great, thank you. So first of all, my job as Prime Minister is to stand up for Canadians, whether that is to the opposition or whether that is to premiers. Of course, I would work collaboratively, but you have a responsibility to your citizens to deliver healthcare effectively. But one thing that I think all of us agree on this stage is protecting our public healthcare system. Pierre Poilievre is in the pockets of people who want to privatize our healthcare system for profit. That is not something that I think any Liberal stands for. We will protect our universal healthcare system for Canadians.
Frank Baylis.
So in the 1960s, when the system was designed, if you were unlucky enough to have diabetes, heart disease, cancer, you passed away much earlier. Today, we have extended your life expectancy. Now with that, that's the paradigm change that we need. Our system wasn't designed to look after those people, so we need to readapt it, redesign it to look after those people. That's how we'll have better healthcare, and it'll actually cost less.
Okay, I want to thank you for that third theme. We're going to move into our final theme of this evening. It has been whipping by, I must say. And this is, again, a 1-minute question for everyone. And it is, again, a question from one Liberal from Alberta. Her name's Rhonda. She says, are you keeping, and we did hear this in the French debate last night, but not in the English so far, are you keeping or getting rid of the consumer tax? But to that, most of you here have supported this marquee government policy for years. If you agree with ending it, why do you agree with ending it now? So I am going to start with Mr. Carney on this one.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Rhonda, for this question, fellow Albertan. Yes, I support ending the consumer carbon tax, and to be absolutely clear, that's on consumers, it'd be on small businesses, it'd be on farms as well. The reason I do is twofold. One, politics is about people, and this has become too divisive for Canadians. Okay? Secondly, the contribution of the consumer carbon tax is a little less than 10% of our emissions reductions. I've spent a substantial portion of my career working on these issues, and there are better ways to accomplish those emissions reductions, particularly on my proposal, is that big polluters will pay Canadians, not taxpayers, big polluters will pay Canadians for their emission reductions and will improve the options for and the ability of those companies, who are some of our most important companies, to get their own emissions down.
Okay, we're going to come back and debate this more, but Ms. Freeland, you are next with 1 minute.
Well, since we're talking about climate action, I do want to start by recognizing the role that I think history is going to judge very positively that Prime Minister Trudeau has played on climate action. He is the first Canadian Prime Minister to really move the dial. And under his leadership, we have become a country where the economy is growing while emissions are going down. That is a huge accomplishment for our children and grandchildren. On the consumer price on pollution, I was the first candidate to come out and say I would lift that. And the reason is really simple. Democracy is about listening to people. And Canadians were very clear with us in conversations with me that they didn't think that policy worked for them. What we need is carrots. We need incentives to double down on the incentives I put in place, the Canada Growth Fund, the investment tax credits, to create a green transition that delivers jobs and growth for the Canadian economy. I know that we can do that, and I know that that's what Canadians need. And if we let Pierre Poilievre be elected, that will be the end of climate action in Canada.
Okay, we're on the 1-minute segment, and Mr. Baylis, you're up next.
Thank you. So I will implement a climate policy that will have a direct and tangible impact on fighting climate change. And it's going to be recognized, as we've all heard before, polluter pays model. And everyone is going to do their share, industries and individuals. Look, there's a cost to having our garbage collected. There's a cost to having water treatment plants. And we're happy to pay those costs because we have clean earth and we have clean water. And there will be a cost to having clean air. Anyone who tells you there's no cost to it is not being honest with you. So to answer your question about this carbon tax, presently it's not working because what it's doing is just circulating money around. So I'm going to adapt it. And what we're going to do is attack the problem directly. So I'm going to invest funds into programs and Canadian companies that are going to bring forth solutions to fight climate change directly.
And Karina Gould, you have said that you are not going to scrap the consumer carbon tax, that you will stop the increase in April. Maybe discuss that a bit.
Sure. Well, politics is also about leadership, and it's also about conviction. And I'm not going to abandon the fight against climate change because Pierre Poilievre is telling us to do that. I'm a mom of 2 young kids. I cannot leave a planet that is burning to them. I got into politics in 2015 because I wanted to be part of a government that fought climate change. And we did that. And we did that to great effect. And I am proud of that record. But I hear Canadians when they say that this policy is something that is challenging for them. And you know what? We didn't do a good job of talking about it. And when they are talking about the carbon tax, what are they talking about? They're talking about affordability. That's why we need a real affordability plan. It's not that they're against fighting climate change or they're against protecting the environment, but that also means that if you don't have the price on pollution, you don't have the rebate checks that millions of Canadians depend on every single year. If you have a plan to fight climate change, you also need to have a plan to fight affordability.
Yeah, we are, okay,
Yeah.
let's just get right into the debate because, Mr. Carney, go.
I want to pick up on that point, last point, and really go to Pierre Poilievre, the difference between Pierre Poilievre's approach here. Axe the tax, he's got the T-shirt, he's got the slogan, that's all he'd do. He doesn't care about the rebate checks disappearing. He doesn't care about our businesses becoming more competitive. We started this evening talking about the absolute need for our country to diversify our trade, to build with new allies. Climate change, addressing climate change, and I've spent a huge part of my career addressing it, both in terms of policy and leading the largest clean energy investor in the world, okay? But a big part of climate change is about the economic opportunity. We will not have access to the European market unless we make the progress here. So we have to do 2 things. We have to supercharge some of the programs that have been put in place so businesses are getting their emissions down. We are a clean energy superpower, and we have to make all of those households whole on the rebate checks that they will no longer receive. That requires a middle-class tax cut. It requires additional measures, including, final point, polluters paying those households so their energy is more affordable and cleaner.
We have 2 minutes and 30 seconds on the clock, and we're going to have to stick to this. So I want to get through all of you. Ms. Freeland first.
Rhonda, you asked something very specific. What was the moment when I recognized that we needed a different approach? And I can tell you very specifically what that moment was. It was a meeting I had with Wab Kinew, the Premier of Manitoba, really shortly after he was elected. And he is a great progressive leader in, I would say, the tradition of prairie progressives. He says the economic horse has to pull the social cart. I love that. And he said to me, I believe in climate action, but I've just been through an election and the people of Manitoba are telling me that the way the consumer price on pollution works doesn't work for them. Can I do a deal with the federal government where we hit our targets, but we do it in a different way? And that, to me, is leadership. Leadership is listening to people. It is not being inflexible and not telling people what their lives are like, but hearing them. And so I really believe if we want climate action, which is essential, we have to listen to Canadians. And if we fail to do that, the threat is, the danger is that Pierre Poilievre will be elected and he will dismantle all of the excellent work we have done on climate. We have to recognize that. We have to show Canadians we hear them and that we're listening to what they tell us rather than telling them what they should be thinking.
Okay, I'm going to jump in there because we do have to stick to time now. Ms. Gould, you're up next.
Thank you so much. So just a couple of things with respect to my colleagues. Literally the whole reason why we have the carbon tax backstop is because premiers across this country decided they didn't want to participate. So if Manitoba wants to participate, then the consumer price on carbon from the federal government disappears. That's what happens in Quebec. That's what happens in British Columbia. With respect to Mark and the middle class tax cut, the math just doesn't add up. If you are a middle class individual, that tax cut is looking at about $800 a year. The carbon rebate for a family of four is $1,200 a year, and it doesn't help low income or no income Canadians. So it is really important to have a real conversation with Canadians. And if you don't have a plan for those checks, then we don't have a plan for affordability.
I'm going to come to you now, Mr. Baylis. We are going to go into the 1-minute segment, but it's a good follow-up to this. I know you wanted to jump in. To maximize Canada's energy advantage, new pipelines or other energy infrastructure probably is required here. What is your plan for that? And do you feel there is the private interest to get it done? Because a lot of private interest has now just gone, nope, not interested anymore.
So I have an energy security plan which I've announced, and it's going to do a number of things. First of all, as I mentioned, we're going to build 2 pipelines. And why private industry is not interested is because what happens is every time a new government comes in, they change all the rules. There's no certainty. So my idea here is that the federal government will take on the responsibility of having the approvals for the 2 corridors. We'll work with the provinces and we'll work with the Indigenous communities, get all the approvals in place, and then go to tender so people can know with certainty that they can build these 2 pipelines. That's one area of energy security. Another one is I want to invest heavily in nuclear energy, small modular reactors. Canada used to be a world leader with our CANDU reactors and nuclear energy. We have to retake that position. Third thing I want to do is invest in transmission lines. We don't have transmission lines going across the whole country. With the electrification of our economy, we're going to need those. So those were 3 points I want to bring to the table.
Frank Baylis, thank you kindly for that. And Mark Carney, you're up next. A minute.
I'll go back to where we started. We're in a crisis. We need to act. We need to act to build this economy, and part of those actions is or should be around our energy sector. I would convene, as part of First Minister's, discussion of the projects of national interest, which would include both clean and conventional energy, would include pipelines, getting consensus around those projects that we're going to move forward on. Because we are a federation, we need multiple levels of government, but we need speed, and we need the federal government to move with speed. We also need to do, and we can do, and can lead in areas such as carbon capture and storage. We can lead in displacing the 70% of oil in eastern Canada that comes from the United States that is using the money to threaten us. So this is part of a bigger set of opportunities for Canada. I'd help to lead those changes, and we'd do it right from the start.
Ms. Freeland, your 1 minute starts.
I do want to go back to the critical moment our country is facing, to the existential threat that President Trump poses to our economy, to our sovereignty. And Canadians get that. One of the reasons I am so confident that we can get through this and that we can get a good deal that actually we can successfully negotiate with President Trump is because we are an energy superpower. Uranium, hydro, wind, traditional energy. This is a strength, and we need to double down on it. I am very proud to be the minister that got access for our energy to the Pacific. That diversification is so valuable today. It gives us an alternative to the United States. We need that more than ever. I believe there is the national will right now in Canada to double down on our energy strength, to use that as a source of economic security and also of national security, including as something that we can offer to our European and Asian allies whose support we need for our own security.
Okay. Karina Gould, 1 minute.
Thank you. Energy security is imperative not just for our economic security, but also for our sovereignty. And as Canadians, we know how to do something really well. We know how to skate to where the puck is going. And so that means that we need to have a conversation right now about what securing our energy future looks like, both with traditional energy, but also with new renewable energy. If we think about where we're going to be in 5, 10 years, where our trading partners are going to be in 5 or 10 years, we have to have a real conversation about what Canada can provide for Canadians, but also for the world. I'm from Southern Ontario, and we have incredible technology when it comes to nuclear. We have an amazing opportunity to build renewable energy here at home, but also to export our energy and our expertise around the world. This is the conversation for Canadians to be having right now, and to do it with provinces and territories and with Indigenous peoples.
We are going to go into that was the 1 minute debate. We are going to go into the 5 minute final debate of the evening. And this is a question, you can take it wherever you want. How will you differentiate yourself from the current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau? Start with yourself, Ms. Freeland.
I'm actually going to carry on with the previous theme because
I still might come back and ask you, though.
We haven't touched on something really important to Canada, and that actually is an integral part of our energy security future and is a really positive story. And that is Indigenous participation in energy projects. One of the things I was so proud to be able to do as finance minister is create a $5 billion Indigenous loan guarantee program to allow Indigenous direct participation, ownership of natural resource projects, energy projects. This is transformational for Canada. And I think that we really need to embrace the fact that we are a country that can move forward with Indigenous prosperity, and we are a country whose path to reconciliation can include Indigenous people in Canada being partners in building the energy security we need today more than ever.
Okay, thanks. And I will come back with that other question. So I'm going to go back to my original question in this debate. How will you differentiate yourself from Prime Minister Trudeau?
Sure. Let me just first start by saying that I think it's wonderful what you raised, Chrystia. It's just that Indigenous reconciliation is about more than a relationship with natural resources. And this is something that I think we can be extraordinarily proud of, the legacy that Prime Minister Trudeau has put in place when it comes to reconciliation. And we need to be very mindful that a Pierre Poilievre-led Conservative government will back away and backtrack on this really important relationship that Canada has with Indigenous peoples. And I also just want to say that I'm actually really proud of a lot of the work that we did as a government, whether it was the Canada Child Benefit that has lifted over 500,000 kids out of poverty, the early learning and childcare agreements, or the work that we did on fighting climate change. I'm proud of that legacy and that record, and I think all Liberals can be proud of that. Where I see a big difference is in making sure that we stay and I stay connected to the grassroots. And this is something that as Liberals, I want to talk to you specifically about. We need to hear your voices. We need to hear your ideas, because it is always the Liberal membership, the Liberal grassroots that provides the next big idea for Canada and for Canadians. And so my pledge to you is to ensure that we have a robust and vibrant party that is connected in our communities, listening to Canadians and making sure that we can build that future that we want and lead Canada ambitiously into the 21st century.
So that's how you'll differentiate yourself from Mr. Trudeau?
I'm very proud of the record that we have. We've made some mistakes, absolutely. Nobody is perfect, but we've done a lot of good things for this country, and I think we need to build on that success. I can pinpoint the moment following the pandemic when inflation was getting out of control, and Canadians were saying to all of us collectively as a government, they were saying we need help with the cost of living, and we were too late to the game to address those real needs. My pledge to you is to listen to you and to respond to what your needs are today and for the future.
Thank you, Ms. Gould. Mr. Baylis, you're up next. How will you differentiate yourself from Mr. Trudeau?
So I would say that I'm the candidate here that is the most distant from Mr. Trudeau. I was elected, it was over 6 years ago since I've been in the government. And then I was not a minister, so I've not been a minister with Mr. Trudeau's government, nor have I been an economic advisor. Where I will differentiate myself greatly is that I'll be focused much more on the economy. I'll be focused on creating wealth. I'll be focused on getting more money into Canadians' pockets. That's what I'm good at. I'm also going to look at building an innovation-based economy. So I really want to do that. That's going to be my main focus. You need both when you're in government. You need wealth creation and you need wealth redistribution. We've done a lot of wealth redistribution to the point that we're renouncing programs we can't even pay for. And we're letting programs such as healthcare fall apart. So what I want to do is get back in there. I'm a big supporter of these programs, so I want to make sure we have the funds to pay for them. That's going to be where I'm going to be much different from the previous government.
Okay, Mr. Baylis, thank you for that. Mr. Carney, you're up next.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Look, I'm different in the following respects. First, focus on the economy. Laser focus on the economy, and that means good jobs, people's wages growing faster than inflation. It means getting prices down. It means building homes. It means building a future for this country. Secondly, I'm much more hands-on. I'm much more of a hands-on person, hands-on manager. I focus on results and getting things done. Thirdly, and I've heard this, I'm fortunate to have support in the caucus. I hear directly from the supporters about more regular and two-way dialogue with the caucus. I meet with my supporters virtually during the course of this leadership campaign to hear their ideas, to hear their energy, to hear what's going on, what they're seeing on the ground, to share my perspectives in order to move forward.
Okay, and Ms. Freeland, I am going to come back to you on this one. I only have about 30 seconds on this. How would you differentiate yourself after being in the Justin Trudeau government for all of these years?
Well, first of all, we as Liberals have to be proud of the great things our government has done. National System of Early Learning and Childcare, Canada Child Benefit, support for seniors, CETA, NAFTA. We have done a lot, and we need to remind Canadians about that. But, you know, for me, this campaign has been a personal liberation, and I am my own person, and it is great. I personally do not believe in a style of leadership, which is a one-man band. I think that the best kind of leadership is collaborative and listening, and that's how I'm running my campaign. I believe that we have to be practical and we have to focus on jobs and growth.
Okay.
But most importantly, I am a ferocious mother, and I will fight for Canada with the same ferocity that I fight for my kids. I will fight for your kids too. And the reason I am running is I am the leader who can stand up to Donald Trump and win.
Okay, we still have closing statements as well. So this is that opportunity for each candidate. I may have to take some time away because of that. And Ms. Freeland, you are chosen as number one to have your closing statement first. So your minute 30 is there. We might have to clip it a little bit.
Well, first of all, I do hope Donald Trump, who takes a keen interest in Canada, is watching this debate, because what he will hear from all the Liberals is, we believe in Canada, we are not going to capitulate, and we are going to fight for our country. And Canadians across the country are coming together to fight for Canada. Hockey fans are belting out "O Canada." Restaurants pulling U.S. wine from their menus. Snowbirds not flying south this winter. Our country is standing strong, smart, and united. I am so grateful to be here with 3 other Liberals who love Canada and to have the chance to talk to 400,000 Liberals who love Canada too. Now, Pierre Poilievre, he actually agrees with Trump. They both say that Canada is broken. We know that's not true. We are leading a great wave of Canadian patriotism. Let's use that passion to make our amazing country even better. I know we can do it. Let's commit tonight to fight for Canada. All 4 of us on this stage, all of us Liberals, all of us Canadians. Together, we will win.
Chrystia Freeland, thank you so much for your closing statements. Now, Karina Gould, your time.
This is a critical time for our party and for our country, and we have to meet this moment. We will only win the next election by being Liberals, proudly, not Conservative light. Not by running from the progress we've made, not by putting forward ideas that just tinker around the edges. We deserve a leader who is honest with Canadians, who can unite us around big ideas, and who has the political experience to deliver real solutions to the problems we face. A leader with a track record of standing up to bullies, a leader who won't back down. I've always been someone who will stand by what I believe in, say what I mean, and fight for what is right. I've made the hard decisions and stood up for Canadians. I believe Canada is the best place in the world to start a family, grow a business, and build a future. Because we are a nation of dreamers and doers, creators and innovators. Because Canada is where opportunity, empathy, and progress walk hand in hand. I have a vision for Canada, one that will allow us to deal with the problems we face today and be ready for those we'll face tomorrow. It's time for a new generation of leadership that understands you and is focused on you. I'm here for Canada, today, tomorrow, and for years to come. I'm the leader for the future, and the future starts now. Thank you.
Karina Gould, thank you so much. Frank Baylis, you're up next.
Thank you. So Canada is a country of wide open spaces and big ideas. And with my plan, we will build a strong and resilient economy that will benefit all Canadians. We will improve our healthcare system, and it will become the best healthcare system in the world. We will modernize our federal government so they can deliver its services to our citizens in a very effective and efficient manner. And yes, we will repel and we will overcome the attacks of President Trump. Now, in the last 10 years, the world has changed profoundly. And now, as a country, we need to go in a new direction. As you look to choose your next leader, I would ask you to reflect on these 3 points. I have the best, most credible plan to build a strong, resilient economy. I'm best suited to defeat Pierre Poilievre and expose him for exactly what he is. He's a career politician who likes to make up slogans and nothing else. And I have the background, the experience, and the expertise to firmly stand up to President Trump. I will successfully defend our nation. I will defend it against his attacks on our economy, on our culture, and yes, our sovereignty. My fellow citizens, I represent that new direction. So let's be bold. Let's be ambitious. Together we will build a proud and prosperous Canada. My name is Frank Baylis, and to make this happen, I need your support.
Mr. Baylis, thank you so much for your closing statement. And finally, we go to Mark Carney.
Thank you, Hannah. Fellow Liberals, my fellow Canadians, from coast to coast to coast, you've told me that you're anxious in the face of an uncertain future. You've told me that you're looking for positive change, that you want a leader that bridges divides. You want a plan that defends our interests and creates opportunities for everyone. Every experience in my life, whether by accident or design, has led me to this moment. I'm ready. It's true, I'm not a career politician. I am a pragmatist who knows how to get things done. I've managed economic crises, built strong economies, and run tough negotiations. And this gives me the experience to lead Canada at this crucial time. We're facing a very different world to the one we've known all our lives. The Canadians are ready to unite and stand up for our country. We will seize this moment to win for Canada. I love our country. Canada has given me everything: my family, my education, my values. And in return, I'm ready to give everything for Canada. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the end of the English Liberal leadership debate. I want to thank all 4 candidates for a great job this evening. Voting does start tomorrow. I know. And then the announcement of the next leader of the Liberal Party will be made on March the 9th in Ottawa. So congratulations to all of you for putting your name in to do this, and look forward to seeing the results. Thank you kindly, and thank you for watching.
And thank you, Hannah, for
Thank
doing
you,
a
Hannah.
great job.
Yeah.